Okay, so we have college football week 1, how to expose weak games with spreadsheets, Excel, Google Sheets. But first, shout out to the members who subscribed. They, of course, got access to the minus 127 parlay that hit today, Chelsea to win, over 1.5 goals, and then the Katrina Scott tennis line money line. That's all data picks, nothing but data picks. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, comment below, send me all the love, all the hate. And of course, let's just get into week 1. There's a lot to inspect, a lot to analyze, but I think we can make a killing this week. Okay, so if we're going to be analyzing college football data, I need college football data. I went to thefootballdatabase.com, which has a pretty great website for finding college football data sets. And as you can see, they break it down by team offense and team defense, which is perfect for this scenario because we want to analyze the offense. So I copy this table and then I go back, I copy the team defensive table here, the defensive overall table, and then I paste that basically into this Google Sheet. The green was the offensive table. The blue was the defensive table. I just already had it done just to save time. This makes it much easier for us. The things I always preach when setting up a data set to analyze is let's clean up our headers. The football database website leaves the headers abbreviated. So this way you'll see obviously games is GMS, total points is TOT, I like to clean up these headers so when I'm done with this file, after I clean it, I've added my conditional formatting, of course, but then my headers, they're a little bit easier to understand. They're a little bit easier to see. They make sense. It'll be games played, total offensive points per game. It's just easier to see this way. Okay, after we've cleaned up our data set, you can see we have something that's a little bit easier to read through and analyze. Right here, I'm looking at the total offensive points per game. I'm going to sort it to the highest. Georgia, of course, dominant. You'll see 616 total points. If I go to the bottom, UMass, 150. New Mexico, these offenses are just absolutely terrible. When I'm looking at, let's say, other metrics, such as pass yards per game, we're going to see Washington was on top, Western Kentucky, and then Georgia Southern, and then one of the teams that we're going to see tomorrow, which is USC, and Caleb Williams, one of the Heisman frontrunners. The great thing is, of course, we're looking at offense and defensive tables. I'm just going to make this a little smaller, but this is using conditional formatting makes it a great way to see how balanced teams are efficiently. So sometimes, like, let's see, I want to look at defensive points allowed, sort by the highest. So Colorado had one of the worst, but let's sort it by the lowest. Illinois had one of the better defenses as far as points allowed, but you can see their offensive metrics over here are in the red. Air Force, pretty good on all around as far as offense. You see they have greens in total rushing and offensive rush yards per game, but really good defensive metrics. You also have to take into account some of the conferences that some of these teams are in. That will, of course, skew the data here. So for deeper analysis, I want to start creating some of my own metrics to analyze with this sheet. The first one I'm going to create is a net yards per play. So it's basically measuring the offense against the defense. This metric is going to provide insight into the average net yards a team achieves when they have the ball versus when they're on defense. It's a useful efficiency metric that gives a quick view of the team's overall dominance on the field in terms of yards. It's basically the total offensive yards per game minus the total yards allowed per game. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my formula, and it's going to be J2 minus R2, and I'm going to spread this formula down the path, down the column, and just to see who has the best net yards per play in the country as of 2022, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Florida State. No mistake there with some of the teams we see. Let's keep adding metrics. The more metrics we have that we create, the better our analysis is going to be. So the more accurate our bets are going to come. This one, let's do an offensive scoring efficiency metric. This is going to give you an idea of how many yards a team needs to gain on average to score a point. A lower value is going to indicate a more efficient scoring offense. For this value, we're basically going to do our total offensive yards, which is going to be I, column I, and we're going to divide that by our total offensive points, column C. So I will put my formula into the column, okay, and I will drag it down. And remember, the lower the value, the more efficient the offense is going to be. When we filter to the lowest values, we'll see Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, some of the best offenses in the country for 2022. Our next metric is going to be a little bit more intricate. This one's going to be eventually our yardage point differential ratio. This is going to be an indicator of how well the team's yardage gain allowance correlates with their points scored allowed. A higher positive value indicates that a team is not just gaining yards, but converting them effectively into points and simultaneously preventing opponents from doing the same. This formula is going to be our total offensive points minus our defensive points allowed, and then divide that by our total offensive yards minus our total yards allowed. So the formula is going to be a little bit more intricate, but this metric should provide a little bit better analysis for our up-and-coming metric. So there's our formula. We're going to move it down the line, and let's see who has the higher positive value. Well, Kentucky's off the charts at plus 300. Their offense looked horrific, but their defense looked to be like one of the best in the country. I would probably look out for Kentucky this year. I think a metric like this means, hey, they're stabilized on defense. They just had to get the offense going, and I think they will with a little bit more experience. But then you could look down the line. Louisiana, Army, Michigan. These teams aren't necessarily the best in the country, but they have a good yardage point differential. They're effective, at least in their conferences. This is going to be the final metric. This is going to be the one that'll really help us measure the two teams in the matchup. It's going to be a team efficiency score. Team efficiency score is basically going to weigh the offensive and defensive metrics that are critical to analyzing a team and their matchup. It's going to emphasize certain critical aspects like offensive points per game will have a weighted average, net yards per play will have a weighted score, and then defensive points allowed per game, as well as the yardage point differential ratio. So we're going to measure and weigh a few different metrics all in one to come up with one of, like, let's say, one of the sharper metrics to measure all these teams against each other. I'm going to now copy my formula, paste it, move it down the line, and now I'm going to sort to the team with the highest team efficiency score. And just from what we're seeing here, and I'll zoom in, we can see Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Florida State, your James Madison. I like James Madison, man. I like James Madison a lot, man. But what we have here is looking now at the team efficiency score metric that we created, which has weighted scores for the important metrics that we're analyzing these football teams with. We could say these may be some of your better teams in the country. Of course, when it comes to football, you have to do this by conferences. We're doing this by the entire pool. So it's going to measure them all together. And if you have success in your conference, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have success in the SEC. Okay, so our data set is all ready. It's ready to analyze. I'm not just looking at it now by team, the offensive scoring efficiency, the yardage point differential ratio, and our team efficiency score being the most important. This way it'll be easier for me to analyze these Saturday matchups. The first one on the ticket, Navy versus Notre Dame. So let's go ahead and plug in Navy and Notre Dame. Okay, the line on this one, according to FanDuel Sports, is number 13 Notre Dame minus 20.5, and the over/under at 48.5. Now, looking at just the total efficiency, the team efficiency score, Notre Dame is a significantly favored team over Navy. I'm going to go with Notre Dame on this one. Obviously, 20.5 for me is too rich, but I could probably lower that and sustain the risk better. The next game on the ticket is going to be Massachusetts, UMass, and New Mexico State. And the line on FanDuel Sports is going to be UMass plus 7 and they are at New Mexico State. New Mexico State does have a significantly better team efficiency score. The line is 7. I'd probably take that, but the minus 280 on the money line is probably a better option. The next game that I'm looking at least on this line here, Ohio and San Diego State, that game is too close to call. That's minus 2.5. But I'm going to look at Hawaii and Vanderbilt. That line is Vanderbilt a whole minus 17.5, over under 55.5. Both of these teams on 2022 metrics were really bad. In this case, I'm going to go with Vanderbilt, just the home favorite to beat Hawaii, but not too confident on this one. The next game is the big ticket game for Saturday, which is going to be USC, and they're going to face San Jose State. And this is going to be the last time that San Jose State has a chance to get at USC, but I think USC is loaded with talent. The line on this one is minus 30.5, over under 66.5 on FanDuel. I'm for sure going to go with USC, not minus 30.5, but I'll lower the risk on the spread. This way it's a policy insurance. And then, if you want to keep the night going, don't stop. You have Florida International, and they will, do we not have FIU? We do, FIU. And they're going to be facing against Louisiana Tech. And another matchup of bad teams, according to team efficiency score, but the home team, Louisiana Tech, is a 12.5 point favorite. I might just like the money line on the home team, minus 490. But that's pretty much how you're going to be able to analyze Saturday's lineup. I think if you play with some of the odds, you can make a pretty creative ticket with some policy insurances on over and unders. Well, guys, there you have it. I'm excited. I'm going to be going with Notre Dame on the alternate spread, minus 13.5, over 40.5 points against Navy. Notre Dame should come out that game. They're their early 2:30 game, basically kicking off college football. Then I'm going to also lay USC minus 19.5, another alternate spread play. Also the over 54.5 on that. Then followed by New Mexico State money line, Vanderbilt minus 6.5, and Louisiana Tech to finish off the night just on the money line. Of course, if you see the pattern here, I like home favorites. I like the talented teams, but I also like to lay or spread out a little bit of that risk with the alternate spreads and then the overs. I think when you add safe overs, safe alternate spreads, you'll get these minus 159, minus 233s on the home favorite teams, which is something I really like. And I think this is a pretty good way to start off the college football weekend with a plus 387 win. Of course, remember to like, subscribe, and join the channel. It's free. This information is always free. The members lounge is free. And we hope to keep doing this for the Sunday Big Dog NFL games.